Welcome to the January 22nd edition of Office Hours presented by the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. My name is Dr. Tisa Silver Kennedy, and thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get into the questions that have come from our community, I just want to share a bit about the center, and as always, a quick disclaimer, a few updates, and then we'll get into the questions. So, what is the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness? We call it MCFU, and it was founded in 2021 with a vision for all college and career school students in Maryland, and that is that they would be able to achieve these 6 pillars of collegiate financial wellness. Those are being creditworthy, ready, resilient, empowered, successful, and thriving. If you'd like to learn more about the vision, our mission, our team, and our programs, you can visit us online at mccfw.org. And if you'd like to support, because the information you have learned in office hours has helped you personally, you can also make donations there at mccfw.org/support. And we are a 501c3 tax exempt organization. So your donation will be tax deductible and much appreciated. All right, let's move on to a disclaimer that's specific to office hours. Office hours is presented for informational purposes only. The information presented during this episode does not constitute personal, legal, or financial advice. We do our best to give you the most up-to-date information on what's happening in the world of student loans and financial aid, but sometimes things happen quickly and maybe even during this broadcast. But the information we're giving you today is up to date as of yesterday, January 21st. And it's important for you to make sure that you take in information from sources like office hours, but also take into account your personal circumstance, your student loan balance, the number of lenders that you have, your income, other household characteristics. All of those things have to be taken into consideration before you make any major decisions about your repayment journey. And we thank you for trusting us to be a part of that journey. All right, so let's move on to updates. So there has been a transition from the Biden-Harris administration to the Trump-Vance administration, and many people are asking, is forgiveness over? What's happening? And right now, we haven't seen any indication that like all forgiveness is gone. You have to remember that there are different kinds of loan forgiveness, and the roots for some of this loan forgiveness dates back to the mid-1990s. So the rules have survived multiple terms from different parties in control, and they're still here. So we have to wait and see what's going to happen. In the meantime, I definitely encourage people not to worry, just to pay attention to the news and remember that with any transition of power, we're going to have changes. So don't worry about it, but just be mindful of it and make sure that you are prepared by being aware of how much you have in loans, which servicers are servicing those loans. And if the loans are federal, that you're able to get into studentaid.gov, because that's the key to the records. We've also heard from some people that are having difficulties accessing those records. For instance, some people who've applied for public service loan forgiveness in the past are going into complete new or updated applications, and they're not finding their employer's information in there from their previous application. They're able to see a PSLF count, which means that the prior applications have been approved, but they can't see the information about their employer. So they're having to enter in, the EIN, the details of the work, the address, and things like that again. So just make sure that you go into studentaid.gov, take an inventory of what's there, take screenshots if you want to, if that makes you feel more comfortable. But just remember that we were in a time of lots of transitions before the presidential transition. And now that there has been a transition, we'll probably, see more changes coming about, but please do not worry. The second thing is something that we saw come about just before the end of the Biden-Harris administration's term, and that was the unveiling of the IDR Payment Tracker. Now, we have been talking about the IDR adjustment, I think, since early 2022, so this is almost 3 years in the making. But we have visited with many clients, and they are now able to see a payment counter that's relevant to IDR. And from what we've seen, the way the information is presented looks very similar to the PSLF payment tracker in that you see month by month whether a month qualifies or whether the month is ineligible. And if it's ineligible, there's a reason that's given there. So you can pine through your history and see, how much credit you have toward those forgiveness milestones. And for income-driven repayment, the milestones are 20 years or 25 years, depending on the types of loans you borrowed and the repayment plans that you're enrolled in. Just remember, the adjustment has some very generous rules. So it's looking backward and giving people credit for periods of repayment, even when the borrowers did not meet the requirements of the program. And that was that you had to be enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan and had to have made payments. So the IDR adjustment assigned credit for history very leniently. But now that the adjustment period is finished, we're in a space where to continue earning credit, you need to be enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan, and you need to be making your payments on time in full as promised. So if you have not seen the payment tracker yet, don't worry, you're not alone. I don't see it on my own personal account. And I'm not sure if that's because my loan balance is low enough that I'll pay it off before the income-driven repayment term, or if they just haven't gotten to everyone yet. I'll keep checking. So some of you might not be able to see it, but you should check. Go to studentaid.gov. And for the people that we've been able to see the tracker for, it's actually on the dashboard. So as soon as you get in and pass the two-step verification and, accepting the rules, you should be able to see that payment counter there. And that will provide a much needed status update so that you'll know where you stand relative to those income-driven repayment milestones for loan forgiveness. All right, so I think that's all I have for the updates. And this time we'll go to our first question. All right, the question is, what's going on with my PSLF? This is a popular question, and everyone has this question for a different reason. So let's get some background before I answer the question. All right, so Team McPhee visited the borrower school in April. They said they were late to the party and met with a student loan strategy coach in June. They have not received their payment count. Their consolidation loan has gone through, but the payment count has not. Both of their employers signed it, but it's still sitting in an in review status. Does this mean that my PSLF is rejected? So let's take a look at the answer. Well, I just want to remind everyone who's applied for PSLF and might be waiting to hear something, you may be delayed but not denied. Even if you receive a letter that contains a payment count and reads like a denial, the fact that you have a payment count means that you did have some periods of repayment that do qualify for PSLF. So you might not have met that 120-month threshold yet, but you're still on track to benefit from PSLF if you maintain your repayment and maintain qualifying employment. So what we have observed is that some PSLF applications have just been sitting still. And these are ones that particularly that were submitted right before or during the processing pause that went into effect for May, June, and about half of July in 2024. There's especially a lengthy wait time for borrowers who consolidated while or around the time that they were applying for PSLF. So something that we have seen that seems to revive an old application is submitting a new one. So if it's been some months since you submitted your most recent employment certification, just go to studentaid.gov/PSLF, log in, update your employment application. Once that new application goes in, it seems to spark something within the system that gets things moving. So I hope that the application moves soon and you can give it a nudge by going out and updating your employment through this month, January of 2025. All right, let's go to our next question. That question is, I completed PSLF during all the changes and when everyone was getting forgiven. I still have loans and cannot afford to keep paying this amount in retirement. Are there any options for me? All right, let's take a look at the answer for this one. Quick note, there's a reference to, a time period when everyone was getting forgiven. And I think that that's a reference to what was called the limited waiver. And during the limited waiver period, there was an opportunity for retirees to get in on public service loan forgiveness. Even if they were no longer working in public service because of retirement, they were allowed to apply for PSLF and get credit for time prior to retirement. And for those who met the 120-month threshold, they were forgiven by way of PSLF, even in retirement. Now, for this particular borrower, the situation is different. They have more than 10 years of employment, but remember, PSLF requires that you have to have two things happening at the same time in order for a month to count. You have to have employment for a qualifying employer, and you have to have loans that are in repayment. So those two things have to be happening at the same time. You also need to be enrolled in a qualifying repayment plan. But the important thing is you have to have the employment, you have to have the repayment, and they have to be happening at the same time in order for a month to count. And once those two things have happened for 120 months, then you have met the official requirements for PSLF approval. In this particular borrower's case, they did not enter repayment until 2011. So the count that they have appears to be correct because there was there was retirement. I think there was going back to school. There might have been some Parent Plus loans involved here, but the amount of time spent in repayment. Oh, there's the history. Perfect. This is 2011. They enter repayment for a Parent Plus loan. So when they enter repayment for the very first time, this would have been where the clock could have started ticking for PSLF qualifying payments. Then in 2012, they returned to school. And if you return to school in at least a half-time status, usually your student loans go into an in-school deferment. So the loans were in deferment until the borrower entered repayment again in 2014. Then 3 years later, in 2017, they retired from work. So if you just do some loose math here, loans entered repayment in 2011, they retired from work in 2017, that's just 6 years. PSLF requires a minimum of 120 months, which is the equivalent of 10 years. So with 6 years worth of history, public service loan forgiveness is not a possibility. So their payment counts are only from 2011 to 2017. As per income-driven repayment, they'd need 25 years of repayment to get approved for that remaining balance to be forgiven. And as of right now, they have 97 qualifying payments. For PSLF, they have 20 qualifying payments for the Parent Plus loans and 14 for all of the other loans. Important note here, any months of credit earned during the IDR adjustment can be converted to qualifying months for public service loan forgiveness if you have the documented employment. But this is a situation where the loans were not in repayment for a very long time while the employment was taking place. So even though this person worked as a teacher for 30 plus years, which is well above the 10 years, that are required for PSLF, they didn't have the overlapping repayment history. So it appears that the PSLF account, the count for your PSLF payments is correct. But because of retirement, there is no longer enough qualifying employment to get you to that 120-month threshold. So it looks like PSLF is not an option here. The only way that it would become an option again is if the borrower were to return for work for a qualifying employer. IDR remains an option as long as the borrower stays enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan and continues to make payments on time and in full. But just remember here, with IDR and PSLF, the benefit is at the end, the remaining balance can be forgiven. It's just that IDR takes a lot longer to get there. With PSLF, you can do it in as short as 10 years. With IDR, the minimum is 20 years, and where Parent Plus loans are involved, is 25 years. So it looks like this person has about 203 months left to go. All right, let's move on to our next question. All right, it says, has anyone been getting their requests to get off of SAVE approved since December 16th when they opened this option back up? I like these questions because they're super specific. You can tell they've been watching because they know the time frame. So a little bit of background first. Why would someone want to get out of SAVE? If you've been with us for a while, you've heard us talk about SAVE, which is Saving on Valuable Education, for many, many months, actually more than a year. SAVE is an income-driven repayment plan that was created by the Biden-Harris administration as a revision to an older income-driven repayment plan. And part of SAVE was basically making payments cheaper, especially for people who had undergraduate loans. And SAVE was implemented in the summer of 2023. The second half of SAVE was scheduled to be implemented in July of 2024. But there was a lawsuit that was filed that succeeded at basically bringing the second half of SAVE to a halt. And that second half of SAVE included some very generous forgiveness provisions. So everyone who has been enrolled in SAVE, some people were enrolled automatically, and some people actually took the step of applying to be approved for SAVE. Loans that are enrolled in SAVE right now have been placed in an administrative forbearance. That is a pause that was initiated by the government, not each individual borrower. And during that pause, interest is not accruing. However, the time does not count toward forgiveness by way of income-driven repayment or public service loan forgiveness. So we're working with a few people who are literally at 119 qualifying payments. And if the SAVE injunction had not caused their loans to go into that administrative forbearance, they would have been forgiven months ago. So that's why some people want to get off of SAVE. They want to continue making progress toward income-driven repayment forgiveness or forgiveness by way of public service loan forgiveness. So let's take a look at the answer for this specific question. So according to the Department of Education, the timeline for an application to be completed is 30 days from the date of submission. But also, according to ED, they want you to note they're experiencing processing delays based on volume. There are a lot of people who are trying to either enroll in an income-driven repayment plan or get out of SAVE to enroll in another kind of income-driven repayment plan. So even though 30 days is, what would happen under, I would guess, normal circumstances, you have to remember we're not in normal circumstances right now. So they're experiencing processing delays. We don't know how long those delays are. So we're working with borrowers now on, getting some of those applications in and observing how long it takes for the applications to be processed and for the change to be implemented so that we can come back to you and tell you what to expect. While you wait for processing, though, you can prepare to request these months in forbearance through something called the PSLF Buyback. I actually just helped someone complete a PSLF Buyback request this morning. It was super easy. There's some very specific language that you're supposed to include in a PSLF reconsideration request. It's housed in the same place. All you do is go to the reconsideration request, select a reason for reconsideration, and then copy and paste this text. I'll make sure that we put that text in the comments a bit later, but you want to put that text in there so that they can go back and review all of your months of eligibility. And then what they'll do is they'll take a look at the months of eligibility that have been deemed ineligible due to certain types of deferments or forbearances. And this SAVE forbearance is one that wasn't of your choosing, and you can choose to buy it back. What will happen is they'll look at your months, and in order for a buyback request to be considered, you have to have 120 months of qualifying employment already. So the people that we're working with have the employment, and they would have the repayment history had their loans not been put into this SAVE forbearance. So if you know that you have the 120 qualifying months of employment, and that you would have had forgiveness had it not been for this SAVE forbearance, you want to submit that reconsideration request form and ask to be considered for the buyback. And they will evaluate the time. If you're eligible for the buyback, they'll send you an agreement, and you will have to make a payment in the amount of what you would have paid had you been enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan and your loans were not in a forbearance. Okay, so basically, you're going back and making the payments that you would have made to get to 120. And then once you're confirmed at 120, you'll get the benefit of PSLF. So make sure you hold on to that buyback information. And if you're already at 120 months of qualifying employment, go ahead and submit it at studentaid.gov. All right, let's move on to our next question. That is, I'm waiting and I'm not sure what else to do. Oh my goodness. This is so common, unfortunately, but a lot of people are waiting for things because of many of the process changes, the servicer changes, the lawsuit and injunction changes. There's just a lot of waiting going on, so you're not alone. Let's get a bit more background on what this specific borrower is waiting on. All right, so here are their words. I got the Department of Education letter and understood I am now in a general forbearance, but I've been waiting since October 2024 for my payment count to update and receive my golden letter. So does this mean that Mohila is no longer processing PSLF payment count updates for anyone on SAVE? I'm so close and I should have been forgiven already. I appreciate any insights you may have because I'm getting a little depressed. First, I just want to say it's so unfortunate that people are being forced to wait like this and go through all of these changes. It really is like riding on a roller coaster, but it's just not fun. And depression is very serious. So I just want to tell this person that, I hope it gets better. But if you do feel like you are in a crisis situation, please do reach out to someone that you trust. Um, and again, crisis 988, please take advantage of those resources. But if you're depressed, please do talk to someone so that hopefully you can work through it and get back to a better mental space. I know the waiting is something that can cause anxiety and a host of other mental health issues. So you are not alone in that. We just want you to get to a better place with it. As for MOHELA processing payment count updates, everyone on SAVE, every loan that's on SAVE was put into that administrative forbearance. And while a loan is in an administrative forbearance, your employment can still be counted. It's just the repayment history won't be recognized because the loan technically isn't in repayment. So this is where the buyback could definitely serve as a viable option for this borrower. Because if they've been waiting since October, if October was the time at which forgiveness should have been approved, then they've met the 120 month threshold. So just make sure that you have 120 months of qualifying employment documented with your PSLF applications and then pursue the buyback. Now, if you reach 120, you might see what's coming up on the screen next. Once you reach 120, when you log into studentaid.gov, you should see your PSLF payment progress on the dashboard. And if you see 120 there, but you have not received the golden letter yet, that just means that the process needs to be completed. A lot of people ask, well, once I get to 120, why haven't they forgiven my loans right away? It's because it's not an automatic process. So what we have observed is that a person's loans can get to 120, but they can log into studentaid.gov, see that the count is 120, but then still see their balance existing there. And when people see that, it's clearly conflicting information, because you see, I've got the 120 and it says congratulations, but the balance is still showing up there and you haven't received that golden letter that says congratulations, you're approved for PSLF. But we don't have any inside information on the Department of Education on how this process works, but we just know from what we've seen that once you reach 120, it's not automatic that the loans are forgiven. From what we see, it appears to be like a batch process kind of thing. In any given month, a lot of people are going to reach 120. They don't all get the notification on the day that they reach 120. Maybe there's some type of process that's run to pull everyone from a database that has reached 120. And that's why these forgiveness letters, the golden letters, come in waves. Again, no inside information for the Department of Education. This is what I think based on what we've observed from people who have been approved. So to verify your qualifying payments, you want to go to studentaid.gov, log in, take a look at that payment progress. For some people, a couple of months ago, we were seeing that they had the 120, but the balance was remaining there. And then maybe 3 to 5 weeks later, they got the golden letter that said, congratulations, you're done. Most recently, someone sent me this screenshot that said, not this one, but it looked just like this. It had the 120, it had the congratulations, the balance was still there. And I told them, hey, it might be 3 to 5 weeks before you hear from them. They hit me back about 4 days later and said, hey, I got the letter. So maybe things are moving faster, or, things might move at varying paces depending on, lots of circumstances. Not sure. But 120 is what we're looking for. So let's take a look at the next picture, which has a bit more detail. This is when you go to look at the individual loan details. This is where you see that you have 120 qualifying payments, and congratulations, you've satisfied your obligation and no additional payments are required for this loan. Important note here, you might see this, but you also might still be receiving communication from your servicer that's saying you have a payment due. And that's a question that we get frequently. It's, I see this 120 on my screen, but I've got a payment due next week, and the servicer is telling me my payment is due. Do I need to make a payment or not? And this is where I say no, but some people might want to make the payment, just because they're, a little scared, and then get a refund on the back end. So you have options. I think a happy medium is to contact the servicer. They should be able to see that you have met the requirements for public service loan forgiveness, and then do something on their end to make sure that, you're not making that payment would not bring any harm to your credit report or anything like that. So look for that 120. It should be on the dashboard. All right, let's move on to our next question. That question is, were the rest of my loans forgiven? All right, we're definitely going to need details on this, but before we take a look at the background, I don't want to say it's common, but we have observed people that get forgiveness on some loans, but do not get forgiveness on other loans for a variety of reasons. So let's take a look at the background for this particular question. All right. So this person had 2 loans that were forgiven because they met the requirements of PSLF during the waiver. Then in June of 2024, they consolidated. August of 2024, that new consolidation loan was dispersed. And in December of 2024, their loans are showing a 0 balance. All right. So let's go to the answer. It is check your PSLF payment progress again to see what the payment count says. We're looking for 120 out of 120. With that timeline of having the consolidation loan dispersed last August, enough time has passed, I would think, for you to be able to have a payment count. If you have a PSLF application in there that has not been processed and your payment count has not been updated, I would recommend that you go ahead and submit another one. Submit a PSLF application so that your employment is up to date. But again, the forgiveness at different times, this is something that can happen when you have loans that have differing amounts of repayment history, but you had that qualifying employment. So go to studentaid.gov, log in, check the dashboard for your PSLF payment progress, and also check your past employer certifications to see if you've been given credit for all of your employment. All right, let's move on to the next question. That is, if we do not switch to leave save but are moved over automatically in December, will we still be eligible for the buyback? What payment amount will I have to pay? Okay, so remember, the buyback is basically repurchasing months that would have qualified toward public service loan forgiveness had your loans not been placed in the administrative forbearance due to save. So the period of time during save should be able to be recaptured through that buyback process as long as you had the qualifying employment during those months of the save forbearance. So let's take a look at a bit more background before going to the specific answer. All right. So this person moved from SAVE to another IDR plan in December of 2024. Months on forbearance were on the SAVE plan, and they are 4 payments shy of the eligible PSLF months. That is, that's really cool to be that close. Let's go to the answer. With the 4 payments shy of eligible, this is where we have to be very discerning about the language, because with PSLF, there are 2 kinds of relevant payments. There's eligible payments and there's qualifying payments. In order to be approved for PSLF, you need 120 qualifying payments. So what's the difference between an eligible payment and a qualifying payment? A qualifying payment is one during which the repayment history has been documented and the employment has been verified. A payment that's eligible means that there's the repayment history there, but the employment has not been verified. So it sounds like this person is 4 months away from meeting that eligibility threshold. You have to wait until you meet the 120 months of eligibility before a PSLF buyback request would work for you. So you'll be eligible for the buyback once you have reached 120 eligible payments, which should be in about 3 months. The payment amount for the buyback should be the same as the payment offered by the lowest income-driven repayment plan available at the time of the forbearance. So whatever you have been paying under, not sure when this person got into SAVE, I don't remember, but whatever you were paying on SAVE, the other income-driven repayment plans that are out there now are income-based repayment, pay-as-you-earn, and income contingent repayment are back, but there was some limited availability during the fall. So just know that with the buyback, the agreement that the Department of Education sends you will tell you about the IDR plans. And if you weren't enrolled in one before, you'd have to provide information about your income, but it sounds like this person was. So you'll know the IDR options, and you would have to pay the money for those months during the Save for Parents, as if the loans have remained in income-driven repayment the whole time. So just be prepared to make those 4 months worth of payments valued at whatever the lowest IDR plan payment would be. And once you're able to buy back those months, you can gain approval for PSLF. All right, let's move on to our next question. Okay, it says my loan payment amount is way more than the amount I saw on my IDR request on my consolidation. Do I have to pay? This is a common question too, because what we have seen with several people is that when they completed the IDR application inside of the application to consolidate, they saw one payment, but then when they received the loan paperwork, the payment required looked as if they had never applied for an income-driven repayment plan. So that's something that we've seen for a while. And our advice has been for people to go back and complete the application for income-driven repayment again. So let's take a look at this specific borrower situation before we get to the answer. All right. So this borrower worked with Team McPhew in June of 2024. They completed the consolidation as well as the IDR request for SAVE, and they also applied for PSLF. They had a gap in the time that the loans were in forbearance prior to reentering an in-school deferment. So they've got some pauses there. The consolidation loan dispersed in August of last year. The count for the oldest loans was 109 months, while the others were at 69. The current repayment plan is the standard plan, and they've shared that their results under SAVE were $109 per month, and their payment under the standard plan was $255 per month. The loan simulator says that they are not eligible for other income-driven repayment plans, and they only have 11 more months to achieve forgiveness. Quick note here, before we go to the answer, I just want to point out the differing amounts of repayment history. We have that oldest loan with 109 months, and we have the more recent loan with 69 months. When you consolidated during the IDR adjustment period, which is now over, but when you consolidated during that period, loans with differing amounts of repayment history were basically all brought onto the same repayment clock. And that repayment clock is based on the oldest loan in the portfolio, or it's more correct to say the loan with the most repayment history in the portfolio. So if you had two loans and one had 109, the other had 69, and you consolidated those during the adjustment period, then the entire consolidation loan would be given credit for 109 months. So it looks like that's what this person was able to do. They got in, now they have 109 months on all of their loans instead of 109 and 69. They have 11 months left to achieve forgiveness. Please note that's not the case for people who consolidate right now. If this person were to consolidate their loans right now, their overall payment count on the consolidation loan would be based on a weighted average of the 109 and the 69. So their qualifying payment count will be somewhere in between those two numbers. And it would depend on how much of a balance they had on each of those loans, the ones that were 109 versus the ones that were 69. So let's take a look at the answer. All right. So the standard repayment plan definitely resulted in a higher payment. We saw that $255 versus 109. But right now, SAVE and any future activity in SAVE is kind of at a pause. So the relevant question here to ask is, can you afford the payment that's on the standard plan? Because what you could do is you could continue on the standard plan And you might want to look at an option called temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness, because if you continue to make payments on the standard plan for these next 11 months, you may be able to, from what it looks like with the payment numbers, you should be able to qualify for what's called temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness. This is separate from the waiver, separate from the IDR adjustment. TEPSLF is basically an opportunity to get credit for periods where you were enrolled in the wrong kind of repayment plan. The standard plan for a consolidation loan is typically not a plan that qualifies for PSLF. So you would be trying to get through to the benefit of PSLF, but through the temporary expanded version. Now, the reason that this could work out is because with temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness, there's a requirement that for the last year of repayment, at the start of that year and at the end of that year, you needed to have made payments that were at least what you would have paid if you were enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan. SAVE required you to pay $109. The standard plan is requiring you to pay $255. So if for these last 11 months, you're paying more than what you would have paid on SAVE, then you should meet the requirements for TEPSLF. So that's an option. If you wanted to leave the loans in forbearance, and not make payments, then you could pursue the buyback. And with the buyback, you would wait until you reach 120 months of eligible payments and still have that qualifying employment and then apply for the buyback. I just want to go back to a little bit of the details here. There was an application for SAVE, but the loans are now enrolled in the standard plan. So they're not in a forbearance. But if you cannot afford to make that $255 payment, then you could go ahead and put the loans into a forbearance. You wouldn't be making payments. Interest would be accruing. And that's not a good thing. However, that would give you the freedom to kind of get your things together and figure out if another income-driven repayment plan is feasible for you, or just figure out something as to how a few months from now you could begin to make that $255 payment. So apologize, that was a little bit jumbled. My thoughts were all over the place. But the bottom line is you still have options. You're 11 months away. You have TEPSLF on your radar because you're paying more than what you would have paid on an income-driven repayment plan. You also have a forbearance option there where you could take that forbearance time to enroll in another income-driven repayment plan and then get back on track to continue making payments in the income-driven way and get to that 120 for PSLF. So you've got options. We wish you the best. All right, let's take a look at our next question. All right, the next question is, does having a second child going to college impact the SAI? So we're shifting gears here, moving out of student loans and into the FAFSA, which is quite timely. I want to give a shout out to Morgan State Scholarship Office. They just joined us on Instagram. Good to see you, and you're right on time. All right, so let's take a look at the answer for this question. Having multiple children in college was something that used to be considered for financial aid purposes, but it's no longer considered. Back to the original point of the question, which is about SAI. SAI is an index that's not to be confused with the old number, the EFC, the expected family contribution. The SAI is an eligibility index number that the school will use. Each child's school is going to use to calculate eligibility for financial aid. In the past, the number of children that a parent had enrolled in college at the same time would affect financial aid, but that's no longer happening. So schools no longer consider the number of children who will be in college, career school, or trade school when they are figuring out financial aid eligibility. So that's not happening anymore. All right, let's move on to the next question. That is, my mom is engaged. Does that impact my financial aid? Let's get a bit more background on this one. Okay, so this student is a sophomore in college. Their mother is considering marrying a man that she's been dating. The student's mother makes about $50,000 per year, and her boyfriend makes double her income. Neither the student's mom nor boyfriend has supported the student financially. So these are important details to have. Let's move on to the answer. We have a clarifying question here, and that is, are you under the age of 24? 24 has significant meaning in financial aid because it will mark the difference between whether a student is considered dependent or independent. So if you're under the age of 24, your mom's income will be needed on your FAFSA until you reach the age of 24. Your FAFSA also, keep in mind that it reviews information from the 2 tax years prior. So for the next couple of years, even if your mom were to get married today, that would not affect your FAFSA for the current year because the FAFSA for the current year is based on prior, 2 years ago. So for the next couple of years, the FAFSA will be reviewing the tax years of 2023, 2024, and then 2025. So if your mom gets married in 2025, then the first academic year that could be affected by her new spouse's income is 27, 28. And you might be out of school by then if you're a sophomore now. So we'll see what happens. But for right now, your mother's boyfriend's income, or if she gets married right away, her spouse's income is not going to affect your FAFSA for the current year or the next year. All right, let's move on to the next question. That question is about proof of citizenship. So let's move on to take a look around, because this has to do with a student who is going to school and has to provide documentation of their citizenship. The college requested proof of citizenship. The student is enrolled in an online program, and they requested that I submit the documents, that the student submit the documents in person. The student cannot really get there. Is there another way? This is a question where you really have to go to the financial aid office for the answer. The school is going to determine how you have to submit it. So let's take a look at the answer. The type of documents that are acceptable is determined by your college. There's no way around this one. So contact the financial aid office to see if there are alternative methods of submission for required documents. Having worked in a financial aid office prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, this was common for students to have to come into the office to physically bring in some things, whether it's a driver's license or certain forms had to be filled out in person, or documents had to be submitted in person. Of course, the pandemic changed things, and many schools began accepting things in electronic formats. You want to make sure that you're being safe, though. If they afford you the option to do that, you're not sending anything via email. This would be some type of electronic document submission platform that they use that perhaps you could submit it through, and they take care of the security. But please guard your important documents and important information, and reach out to your school, because they're the ones who are going to have the ultimate say on which format of submission is acceptable for certain types of documents. All right, that does it for the questions that were submitted before the broadcast. I don't see any questions. I do see a couple of people that joined on Instagram. Again, I want to give a quick shout out to Morgan State Scholarship Office, as well as Jamise 236 and 1920s. I really have to figure out how to say this. I always say 1920s Strivers Row. .flow. I might be messing that up, but just know my heart. I appreciate you being here today during the broadcast. All right, I want to close things out with a resource that's available for Maryland student loan borrowers, and that is the Student Loan Ombudsman. The Student Loan Ombudsman can assist Marylanders who have experienced issues with their student loan servicers, including failure by the servicer to communicate with the borrower, errors in crediting principal and interest payments, misapplied payments, inaccurate interest rate calculations, billing errors, loan consolidations or modifications errors, and or inappropriate collection activity or tactics. You can reach out to the Student Loan Ombudsman by going to their website. The Student Loan Ombudsman's office is housed in the state's Department of Labor. All right. I think that does it for today. I've checked again on Instagram, and I don't see any questions coming in there or on Facebook. I thank you all so much for engaging with us today. Please do keep up with us. We are at the MCCFW on X and Instagram, as well as Facebook. So if you have not officially engaged yet, please do like or subscribe and join us in the conversation. You can submit your questions there, or you can go to our website for a more private option. That is mccfw.org/contact. I cannot think of any other updates that have not been shared already. Gave a final look to our social media platforms, and I don't see any questions. So I take it we've answered everything that was in question up until this point. So as always, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back in February. In the meantime, this episode of Office Hours will be annotated and uploaded to our YouTube account at the MCCFW, so that you can go straight to the content that you are interested in. So until next time, again, thank you for joining us, and be well.